can't believe it happened. I thought it was a myth, a legend. But no! I witnessed it with my own eyes. I streamed Diablo for exactly 20 minutes before I got disconnected, and some people already asked me if I was done with Genshin. Did I make it? Am I officially a variety streamer? This weekend we finally got to play the beta of Diablo 4. Which means treat everything you're about to hear as a first impression rather than a review. We only got to play the first act, the level cap was 25, you were not allowed to walk outside of the first region, and still there is a lot to talk about. But while most people focus on the gameplay, the loot systems and the progression, I am the weird guy who is focusing on the story of a hack and slash game. And oh boy was I surprised after completing the first act of Diablo 4. So today, not only will we quickly talk about how the beta went down, but we'll also talk about why Diablo 4 may be Blizzard's return to their golden days of storytelling. Even when we want to talk about the story of a video game, we have to talk about the catalyst for that story, which is gameplay. After all, if the game is not good, the chances of you experiencing the story are exactly zero. But thankfully, so far, things are looking bright for Diablo 4. It all begins with the character creator, which is serviceable. It is nothing mind-blowing, but it's good enough to make a character that is going to represent you during the cutscenes. Which is where you are going to pay attention to how your character looks like the most. During the cutscenes, your character even takes off their helmet to really show them off. In combat and in the outside world, however, it is difficult to notice your character is not pre-made. And after you get into the game, you'll get hit by good old classic Diablo. There aren't any massive innovations, it is a hack and slash dungeon crawler that just works. And when it works well. When the game launches, I want to play a druid. Unfortunately, during the first round of the beta, the closest we could get to that was barbarian, which wasn't the best choice when it comes to balance. Fortunately though, barbarian is the best class to show off why the combat feels so good. Overall, it's a combination of three things. The abilities are fun to use, the sound effects are subtle but stellar, and the impacts feel powerful, especially with the screen shake and the occasional decapitation. In many ways, building a character in Diablo 4 is similar to what we had in Diablo 3. You have an action bar with limited slots, and you pick abilities that synergize together. But Diablo 4 is a tiny step ahead. Their new talent system makes building characters a bit more diverse, with different talents playing off of each other, and with a lot more passive talents to round up your builds. Again, it is not a massive innovation from what we've seen so far, but it is better than what we had in Diablo 3. Although I have to mention that Diablo 4 has the new evade button, which is something Diablo 3 didn't have. Okay, that is a lie. Diablo 3 did have an evade button, but only on consoles. Because Blizzard thought that console players were inferior and they needed help with... Speaking of which, at the beginning the game offers you two difficulties, normal and veteran. Go veteran. Normal is for people who don't know how video games work. Veteran is pretty much the normal difficulty, which also gives you increased experience and loot. With that said, I have to say that I was very surprised that, at times, the game does actually give you some challenge. There are gonna be times when you meet a boss and you kinda have to min-max your tools to beat them. Or you can just rebuild your talents on the spot, which is really cool. However, I learned that at times I probably struggled because I was playing Barbarian. A sorcerer or a rogue have everything so much easier. And that's because Blizzard gives all of their games a staple feature. If you are melee, you're f***ed. From Baron and Shazra in Classic, to every single boss in Burning Crusade, to Reinhardt in Overwatch. In Blizzard games, playing ranged makes your life easier. And so far, this may be proven to be true yet again in Diablo 4. Lastly, when it comes to gameplay, we can quickly mention progression. Diablo is a dungeon crawler, or an ARPG if you want, which means it is based on satisfying loot. And thankfully, I think I can confirm that seems to be the case here. Seeing a legendary drop not only feels satisfying with the orange light and the sound effect, but oftentimes legendaries are also designed to be transformative. In other words, they affect how your character plays. For example, the first legendary I got drastically increased my attack speed, which means, yeah, that was a satisfying drop. Besides drops, Diablo also gives you some achievements which you can hunt for extra rewards. For example, there is an achievement for unlocking all the waypoints, or there is a challenge for killing 40 enemies in 3 seconds. And the rewards can be flat stat increases for all of your characters, or extra loot that can be claimed by any of your characters. Lastly, every region also has its own reputation, and of course you gain reputation there by doing their quests. This may feel a little bit like an MMO mechanic, and that's because at times Diablo 4 is trying to force a bit of an MMO feeling into their game. And so far, running around and seeing other players around feels okay, but it doesn't really feel like it is improving the experience just yet. We've seen that people can get together and fight massive world bosses, which felt kinda good, but I'm hoping in the future Blizzard is gonna utilize the MMO feeling a little bit better. I am not expecting Fortnite level of events, but some events in the future would help with what Blizzard is trying to achieve. Because right now, if you take the open world multiplayer away, not much is gonna change. Besides that, as I mentioned, when the game works, it works well. And if you like action games, you are most likely going to enjoy the gameplay of Diablo 4. Now, after gameplay, before we dive into the story, let's quickly talk about the setting. Diablo has a dark universe, and the game reflects that perfectly. Most of the areas are grim and dark, but the game combats this with a light source that is coming from your character. This is both symbolic, because your character is supposed to be the beacon against all evil, but it is also achieving amazing contrast levels for every dungeon, as well as it helps make the world feel alive. As you move around, all the shadows of all the objects around you are going to shift. This is something the players won't really think about, but it makes every level feel dynamic. The camera work also helps with immersion. When you are in a dungeon, the camera is gonna be a little bit closer to you. This makes it feel like you are in a closed space. And when you are in the outside world, it will zoom out a little bit to help with the open world feeling. Speaking of which, the zoom is amazing, even though it is just a stupid detail. Instead of the zoom acting like it does on a camera, where it changes the FOV as you get closer, which warps the objects on the sides, here, the zoom only brings the image closer, which makes it look like a macro shot. Which makes you feel like you are watching a miniature character from the high heavens. This is so stupid and I love it. Lastly, when it comes to the environment, people may run past these. But these are points in the game where you can interact with this hidden rune, which shows you the amazing scenery. So look for these triangles when you are adventuring around. And of course, no environment would be complete without music. The ambience itself feels great. All the footsteps and crawling around makes everything feel alive. But more importantly, Blizzard took a different approach when it comes to the music of Diablo 4. Diablo 3 had a lot of melodic themes, which made the music feel iconic, but not as immersive. Here, they went full Insano style. There are a lot of creepy drones that underline every scene. Yes, the music is just as catchy as it always was, but Blizzard always shoved a creepy drone into the background, which gives us these great scores which are also unsettling. And at times the music can get gorgeous, in a creepy way. Now, that's pretty much it for the entire gameplay side. Simply said, when the game plays well. So let's talk about when the game doesn't play well. Yes, it is beta, so we can assume most of the bugs will be ironed out. Right? Besides the funny bugs like the character creator creating multiple of the same character, or dying and remaining invisible. Yeah, that was a fun one. the game does actually have bigger problems. The largest of them was a strange memory leak. It wasn't really a leak because it wasn't infinitely consuming your resources, but for some reason the cap on your RAM was so high that people with 32 gigs of RAM were forced into quite a few crashes, which of course spawned memes. Thankfully I didn't face this problem, because my entire game was choppy. To be fair, it's because I am running OBS on the side because I have to record footage, and at this point I do have about 4 or 5 year old machine. So I immediately started looking for an upgrade. But still, on high settings the loss of frame rate is not that uncommon. And I wasn't the only one who experienced this by far. What's really cool, however, is that Blizzard has advanced options that can help with performance. A really big one that people shouldn't sleep on is temporal reconstruction. In a lot of cases, this single box is gonna fix a lot of your frame rate issues. What it does is that it makes the game render only half of all pixels. And then it lets your CPU calculate the rest of the pixels based on the pixels that surround them. This saves some resources on your graphics card. But in rare cases, you may see some artifacts on your screen. That happens whenever the calculations go through incorrectly. But from personal experience, I can tell you, there is no way you are gonna notice an artifact in an action game, unless you are really looking for it. And even if that doesn't fix your problems, just go for medium settings. I had to do it if I wanted to run OBS at the same time, and the difference was minimal. The game still looks great. And for now, just know that yes, Blizzard can do some optimizations. Who knows, maybe the frame rate issue is gonna disappear after they fix their RAM problem. But now, I think it's time to finally go full weirdo mode. I think it's time we talk about the story in a Diablo game. For the longest time, a lot of people always thought that Diablo had a simple story. And on surface, that is definitely what it always felt like. But many people may not know that the universe of Diablo has quite some deep and already established lore. After all, we are dealing with the 4th game in this setting. And after you dig a little bit deeper in, you may notice that the story isn't really good versus bad. It is bad against worse. Or in other words, hell versus high heavens. The extremely TLDR version of the story is that both the Hell and the High Heavens fought over an artifact called the World Stone. This artifact had the power to manipulate the fabric of the cosmos, and it was this artifact that was used to create Sanctuary, which is the mortal world people live in. As it happens to be, Sanctuary was created between the heavens and hell. So humanity got stuck in the middle of a war. In the past, there was an event where the prime demons of hell almost destroyed the gates of the high heavens. But right before it happened, the primes started arguing over who would get to rule all reality after the conquest. Which of course led to all the prime demons fighting. And the high heavens came out unscathed. That's why there is a bit of a rivalry between all the demons. What's great about Diablo 4 is that during the first act, it will explain all the lore you need to know for this game. It will tell you the basics of Diablo 3, it will reference the Horadrim, an order of heroes who fight prime evil led by Tyrael. It indirectly references the Nephilim, who are the offsprings of the demons and angels, and who are also the playable characters of Diablo 3. And later on, just look for these stones. They will actually quickly explain the book lore of the Diablo universe. Speaking of which, let's talk about Lilith. Without any spoilers, of course. What's interesting is that to the vast majority of the Diablo players, this will be an unknown character. I have seen a lot of people who think that after we have defeated Diablo 3 times, Blizzard had to make up a new villain, and so they came up with Lilith. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. She's been a key character in this universe pretty much since the beginning. And some of you may even remember her appearance in Diablo 2. In short, she is the daughter of hatred. with the Lord of Hatred being dull Mephistos, called Mephisto in Diablo 2. And she is the former lover of the Archangel Inarius. Quite a Romeo and Juliet plot twist, isn't it? But for this game, that's all you really need to know about her. The game does actually explain the rest, of which there is a lot. Her lore appeared in the massive Sin War series, as well as the Book of Cain. Unfortunately, this is kinda how Blizzard operates. They put a lot of their core lore inside books, which especially the MMO players are not too happy about. So, how is Diablo 4 dealing with this? Simply said, the storytelling is a massive improvement over Diablo 3. With that said, Diablo 3 was good, and we only got to play the first act of Diablo 4, but still, there is a lot of great stuff to talk about. First of all, the story goes from bad to worse really quickly, and I love it. This universe is grim, it is dark, and they are not afraid to reflect that in the story. In fact, the cutscene that sets up Act 1 might be the best piece of storytelling Blizzard has ever pulled off. I don't wanna spoil it, but it's the card scene. Instead of just turning your character into a hero that is gonna conquer all evil, they actually give them a little bit of a mystery to deal with. And this mystery gives the entire story a new, interesting twist. Because now you are not just wondering how we are gonna beat Prime Evil, but you are also wondering what the heck is going on. And this is something I did not expect to see in a Diablo game. What also helped is that at the beginning, when the game introduces Lilith for the first time, it paints her as a prime evil villain. But then later, you learn about her motives. And at times, you may find yourself feeling sympathetic towards her. Because you learn, as was already shown in all the books, that she isn't just pure evil. I mean, she was with an angel. Which is a massive contrast to most of the other villains from the previous games. Both Diablo and Mephistos were pretty much just evil monsters. But she gives everything a twist, which then quickly starts reflecting in the overall storytelling. As you walk into the world of Sanctuary, you start visiting different cities. And you learn that different places deal with sins differently. Yes, unless you get twisted, everyone still hates demons. But at times, people also don't like pure faith. After all, sins are a common part of everyone's lives. Besides all the main quests that deliver the main story arc, you also have the option to walk around and just talk to random NPCs. Thankfully, everything is narrated, but by doing so, you may learn how really awful it is to live in this world. Which is something you're not gonna pick up only from the main quest. After all, it is the common people who are stuck in the middle of a horrifying war. All of these conversations are really quick, but they give you a lot of world building. And sometimes, after going through all the conversation options, it unlocks more options which gives you more world building. It is really hard to make people appreciate these without spoiling anything. So just trust me that sometimes after talking to some of the random NPCs, things get a lot creepier. Here we can also mention another heavily underappreciated fact. The main character is fully voiced. I know it doesn't sound that impressive, but trust me, after going through that, it is a nice surprise. Which finally brings me to the biggest point of storytelling Diablo 4 has. The reason why the storytelling is so good. And it is the reason why I decided to make this video in the first place. The in-game cutscenes are meaningful, they are impactful, and your character is in them. In comparison, Diablo 3 did have a few beautiful cinematic cutscenes. We still have no idea if these are gonna be here too, but come on, it's Blizzard, they should be. But besides that, you know what Diablo 3 did?
I am their fist. When they would ignite the light of truth, I am their torch.
Yeah, because they didn't have any in-engine cutscenes, they couldn't make your character part of them. And so they had to use these 2D pre-rendered cutscenes, where you were supposed to fill in your character yourself. In Diablo 4, all the cutscenes feel like a proper story progression. In many ways, they feel like the kind of storytelling Blizzard did during Warcraft 3. A game I dearly loved, which made this thing all the more painful. There, even though the in-game cutscenes were nothing special, every time a cutscene was triggered, you knew something special was about to happen. And Diablo 4 is walking in the exact same steps. It really feels like Blizzard is returning to their roots, which is funny because that's kinda what Blizzard is all about these days. And in the case of Diablo 4, it really seems like it is paying off. All the in-game cutscenes are beautiful. Not aesthetically, especially not after you go for medium settings, but in the way they are shot, they are gorgeous. They use clever camera angles and they toy with the shadows, which is on purpose in a story that is all about light against darkness. And after experiencing the first act, and after doing all the side quests and talking to all the NPCs, my god, is this a great breeze of fresh air for this universe. Again, I have to point out that this is just the first act. In many video games, the first act and the last act are always the most fleshed out. Because the first act is your first impression, and the last act is the one you are gonna remember. Because that's the most recent one. Anything in between can often be just okay. But at least when it comes to Diablo 4, I can safely say the story hook at the beginning is very strong, and I just pray they will keep it up. With that said, Blizzard also has another trademark of their own, which scared me after Diablo mentioned Lilith in reference to the cosmos. Because in every single one of their universes, if the story is running for too long, they start fiddling with cosmic threats. And that never ends up well for Blizzard. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to support me on my journey to variety content, consider becoming a member of the channel. When the second round of open beta and when Diablo itself comes out, I will be absolutely streaming it. And lately, my streams kinda went over my expectations. Also, I'll be playing Druid. I'm ready for the pain. Speaking of which, here's a creepy fact before the video ends. We experienced the legendary Error 37 11 years ago. Yeah.